Talking about all that choice foods and wines made me thirsty. We don't know what heaven will be like. In fact, we're told that we can't even imagine. But we try. And the readings today help us to see a vision of the kingdom to come. I just returned yesterday from Chicago. I had a wedding there this weekend. And the writers of the Bible knew what they were doing when they used the image of a wedding to help people understand what the kingdom of heaven is like. I attended a great celebration, one filled with joy and happiness and love. Even if the numbers were a bit scaled down, it didn't diminish the sense of celebration that we all shared. But today's gospel reading suggests that there is another similarity with the wedding feast, something that comes before the celebration. There's the invitation. If we want to join in the banquet, we must be wise enough to accept the invitation. And this part of the gospel reading is not part of what we can expect in the kingdom to come. That part of the gospel is referring to something in the present. The invitation won't come when we are in heaven. The invitation comes now. So maybe we ask ourselves, what will the invitation look like? Will it be like the ones we get in the mail or through Evite? Not likely. We have lots of help, though. A lot of help. The invitations are things that I hope you've all heard already, and probably many times. The invitations are things like, "Come to me, all who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest." Or, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me." And then Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount, "Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock." In the book of Revelation, we hear, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, then I will enter his house and dine with him and he with me." We've gotten a lot of invitations. And if we respond to the invitation, well, what then? Jesus doesn't promise us everything is going to be wonderful if we accept the invitation. We heard what we might expect in gospel readings just a few weeks ago. "If anyone would come after me, let him take up his cross and follow me." But if we do respond, Jesus promises, "I will be with you always. I will not leave you orphans." So, this all sounds like great news. And yet, it's important to remember this is all invitation. Jesus wants us to come. And he wants us to come out of love, not out of command. It is an invitation, not an order. This last part of the parable troubles us sometimes. That part where we hear the man who's invited and then he's thrown out. Maybe that sounds kind of cruel, but this is part of the parable. And whenever we hear the word parable, we should immediately start to put ourselves in that story, because that's what parables are calling us to do. This isn't a true story about something that happened. This is a story for us to think about what Jesus is trying to teach us and to place ourselves in that story and see where do we fit in that story. Who are we in that story? This part of the parable is a warning to his followers that even though they say they believe in him, it's not going to help them much if they don't put their faith into action. There's some theology around now out there that suggests that everyone is going to be blessed in the next life. Jesus is telling us that eternal happiness is not to be taken for granted. The way to eternal happiness is open to all of us, but we have a free will as to how we will respond. And that will require that we put our faith into action. We have ways to do that. The gospel just asked, "Go out, therefore, into the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find." And if we are timid, then we just heard in Paul's letter, God will fully supply whatever you need in accord with his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. Are we doing our part, inviting others to this feast? Our family, our friends, maybe those who feel disconnected for some reason, the stranger. Do you invite others? Pope Francis just published a new encyclical a week ago today, Fratelli Tutti. It's to all brothers and sisters, all, whether they are of our faith or others. That letter tells us in clear terms what we are expected to do for one another, how we are to treat one another with kindness and civility, to be concerned especially for the poor among us. It clarifies for us what precisely it means to be bearers of the good news. It is up to us individually to be Christ's legs, to be Christ's voice. The way to eternal happiness is open for all, but we have a free will as to how we will respond to that invitation. May the banquet we come to today lead us to the eternal banquet that God has prepared for each one of us.